So today we're talking about the heart. And I haven't checked this with the medical authorities, but I trust the information I was able to obtain is correct. The human heart is a strong, muscular pump. It's a little larger than your fist. The engine of this human pump pumps blood continuously. I think we know that through the circulatory system. Each day, and here's your fact for the day, each day the average heart expands and contracts, what we call a heartbeat, about 100,000 times. And it pumps about 2,000 gallons, that's about more than 7,500 liters of blood. If you live to the ripe old age of 70, and some of you may be beyond that, an average human heart beats, expands and contracts more than 2.5 billion times. The circulatory system is this network of elastic tubes that carries our blood throughout the body. It includes our heart, includes our lungs, our arteries and small arteries, the tiny blood vessels, and they carry the oxygen and the nutrient-rich blood to all the parts of our body. If all the small veins that carry oxygen and our nutrient-depleted blood back to the heart and lungs were laid end to end, they would extend more than 96,000 kilometers, about 60,000 miles. That's enough to go around the earth more than twice. What the physical heart is to the human body, the spiritual heart, the center of our life, is important to what it means to follow God. The heart is your true self. The heart is the part of you that feels, that delights, that grieves, that desires. The heart is the imagination, the place inside where we conceive, where we make connections, where we dream. The heart is the place where you exercise your freedom, where you decide, the mechanism that chooses what you're going to do this day, who you will marry, whether you will lie or not, how you respond in a crisis. That's all. We talk about that in our hearts. The heart is the sphere where we meet God or avoid meeting God. And so Jesus pronounces his sixth blessing. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they will see God. But what does a pure heart look like for people like us, who, as the object lesson so vividly demonstrated, absorb all sorts of things in a typical day? Just think of the thousands of image-focused ads each day. And all of those ads are leading us to believe that what is all important is our external image. And that what is beneath the external, what's beneath the surface, is irrelevant. And all the mixed and contradictory messages that we get about what we want, what we need, and all of those things translate into mixed and contradictory messages about who we are. I identify with the cunning spy, Bond 007, may Sean Connery rest in peace, during the show. But I'm the cautious family man who wants good life insurance during the commercial. I want to give more time and money to the victims of the latest natural disaster during the news. And then during the commercial, I want to spend my money on the lottery. I'm the guy in the flashy, brand new, expensive, decked out to the hilt truck during the commercial. And then I identify with the pilgrim assisting Mother Teresa during the show. What does a pure heart look like for people who even smirk and scorn at that very word, pure? Pure. As for purity bringing blessedness, even people who may be all for purity think not in terms of purity being a blessing. Probably we think more in terms of purity as a discipline that we have to endure. And the reward that's promised by Jesus, the privilege of seeing God, how much appeal does that have today? Seeing God isn't really a major life goal for many of us. Maybe in eternity, but not so much here and now, in this day, on this planet. So what's Jesus getting at with this blessing about those who are pure in heart? The word that is translated in our English Bibles as pure is the Greek term katharos. And if you hear that word, you probably guess that it's the root or it's the ancestor of our words, catharsis or cathartic. And as used in the time of Jesus, the word simply meant clean. And it was used to describe soiled clothing that had been washed. And the term was also interestingly used to describe grain that had been winnowed and sifted and rid of the chaff. So purifying involves cleansing something until only its uncontaminated elemental components are left. So you burn away the dross, and you have what's left is the gleaming, pure metal. You boil away the germs for a sanitized pot. You thresh out the chaff for wholesome, nutritious wheat. Purity. Maybe a good understanding of what that word means is that purity means being unadulterated. Purity means being singular. And when Jesus talks about a pure heart, he's talking about a heart that has been purged and cleansed so that it is unadulterated, that it is unspoiled. I like how the Danish philosopher Søren Kierkegaard defined it. He says that purity of heart is to will one thing. In other words, purity means an absolute singleness of life and purpose. And that's important to understand. And Jesus is talking about purity of heart. And purity of heart encompasses far more than purity of words, far more than purity of thought or deeds or sexual purity. It includes all of life. And so when we talk about purity of heart in the biblical sense, we mean thought and conduct. We mean body and mind. We mean sex and conversation. We mean reading and viewing and hearing. Purity of heart does not just mean innocence. A pure heart knows contamination. And a pure heart knows the pain of letting it go. A pure heart knows the relief of letting it go. As far as I know, the only place in the Bible that explains why God created human beings is found in the book of Acts, in this passage. If you remember here, Paul the apostle is preaching to the Greek philosophers, the Greek intellectuals, we might say, in Athens. And he says, as he is talking to them, that God created us so that we might seek God and find God. That's why God created human beings. The purpose of our existence is to seek God and find God. And so there is within each and every human being that desire, that fundamental motivation, that basic longing for fulfillment of that purpose. We're not only born with God at our center, but we're also born with a heart that is full of desire for God. Knowing what you want is knowing your heart. Knowing what you want is finding where your treasure is. And it's no accident that Jesus says that when the heart is pure, when you have that singleness of purpose, vision of God will follow. Because seeing God answers that desire that God has created within us. But over the course of our lives, that desire for God is fragmented. It's fragmented by all of the attachments that we build up throughout the course of our lives, right? Attachments to our stuff, attachment to our status, to our sources of security, all the things that we cannot take with us when we die. Our attachments are the hooks by which illusory gods pull us in all different directions. And so it's no surprise that Jesus teaches in this same Sermon on the Mount, where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. The letting go of attachments is the cleansing by which we purify our hearts. Purity of heart is that one will, one purpose, seeking God. Here's the good news of this beatitude. We don't need to heroically achieve absolute purity and laser-like single-mindedness to claim the blessing, to see God. We need only to embrace the process, to strive for that single-mindedness, to strive for keeping God in where God needs to be as the Lord of our lives. We need only to detach enough from all of the other lesser desires in our lives and see them for what they are, that God is number one and everything else are just attachments, just stuff. We need only to keep returning to purity of heart, even in ordinary moments, and wait and trust that the loving God who never gives up will bless us. Blessed are the pure in heart. Just as Jesus blesses those that we talked about last week, who hunger and thirst for righteousness, rather than that non-existent set of people who have already achieved it, Jesus blesses the pure in heart. And so we await that day when God will completely cleanse us, not like a smith who's hammering away or burning away the dross, but like a mother bathing her child. And that will be the day when we will see God. And so in Revelation, and we had a verse earlier this morning from Revelation, it's a great book to go to catch this vision. Talking about being in the presence of God, nothing impure will ever enter God's presence, nor will anyone who does what is shameful or deceitful, but only those whose names are written in the Lamb's book of life. and they will see his face. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they will see God, and his name will be on their foreheads. And maybe in the meantime, purity of heart, maybe we can boil it down to something a little bit more manageable to take with us this week. And maybe we can boil this beatitude down to that simple exhortation in a hymn that many of us have sung. Turn your eyes upon Jesus, because in doing so, what does the hymn say? Other claims will grow strangely dim.